The evening had been planned down to the smallest detail, or at least that was what I believed. The reservation at the quiet Italian restaurant, the soft music playing in the background, the low candlelight dancing off the glasses of wine, it all suggested an attempt at romance, maybe even reconciliation. I had been hoping for something meaningful, something that would help us find our way back to each other after months of silence and emotional distance. My husband, Daniel, had insisted this dinner was important. "We need to talk," he'd said, in a tone that gave nothing away, neither comfort nor threat. I wanted to believe something good could come out of it. I dressed carefully, choosing a soft cream-colored dress he had once told me he liked. I put on the necklace he gave me for our anniversary years ago, hoping its familiarity might remind him of the warmth we once shared. When we arrived at the restaurant, Daniel acted strangely from the start, restless, fidgeting, glancing around as if waiting for someone or something to appear. He barely made eye contact, his fingers tapping against the table, silverware shifting, water glass moved back and forth. When the waiter approached, Daniel spoke quickly, ordering without looking at the menu, like he needed to get the formalities out of the way. I tried to speak to him gently, asking if he was all right, if something had happened at work, if there was something he needed to tell me. He would answer only in clipped responses, nothing more than necessary, leaving me to sit with confusion rising like thick fog. The appetizer arrived untouched. He pushed his fork around the plate. I could feel anxiety prickling beneath my skin. I had prepared myself to hear something about our marriage, maybe his unhappiness, maybe counseling, maybe a separation. I had not thought beyond that. I did not imagine disaster or betrayal. I did not imagine leaving the restaurant changed and humiliated. Just as I leaned forward to ask him directly, finally tired of the suffocating silence, his phone buzzed. The screen lit up and I could see the name, someone I didn't recognize, but before I could think to ask, he stood up abruptly. Not with urgency or shock, but with the calculated decision of someone who had rehearsed the moment. He didn't even push in his chair. He just placed his napkin on the table and said, almost casually, "I'll be right back." His tone was light, unfittingly calm, but he didn't return. Minutes passed. Then 10. Then 15. I tried calling him, but the call rang out. I sent a message asking where he was, if something was wrong, if he needed help. No response. I felt my heartbeat shift from confusion to dread. I tried to convince myself that there could be a reasonable explanation, but my instinct screamed otherwise. When the waiter came to check on us again, I asked if he had seen my husband step out. He shook his head with a polite but puzzled expression. My chest tightened. I stood, walked toward the restaurant entrance, and stepped outside. The cool air hit me sharply. I looked around the parking lot, scanning for his familiar figure, but the car was gone. That was when I felt the first true wave of realization wash through me. Something was terribly, deliberately wrong. That I walked back inside, my movements stiff, mechanical. It felt like the room had become unfamiliar, as though I had stepped into a space where everyone knew something I didn't. The waiter approached me again, but before he could speak, another man entered the dining room from the kitchen hallway. His clothes were damp and worn, streaked from water and soap. He had the unmistakable look of someone who worked behind the scenes, likely the dishwasher. Yet the expression on his face was different from what one might expect in such a position. He looked determined. He looked like someone carrying a message. He approached me directly, slightly out of breath, as though he had hurried to intercept me before I could leave. "Ma'am," he said gently, "I think you should sit down." There was something in his voice that struck through my panic and confusion, something steady, something grave. The other diners around us continued eating, unaware of how drastically my world had just shifted. I sat because I didn't know what else to do, and because my legs no longer trusted themselves to stand. The dishwasher reached into his jacket pocket. His hands trembled just slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what he was about to hand me. An envelope, just a plain cream-colored envelope. No name written on it. No markings. But the moment I held it in my hands, I knew. The thickness of it. The careful seal. The silence of his departure. It was all planned. And not planned with love. My lungs tightened, my fingers barely able to grasp the paper. I didn't want to open it. I didn't want to know what was inside. I didn't want the truth, not like this, not delivered by a stranger in a restaurant where I had expected to salvage the remains of my marriage, but the man who had brought it to me didn't walk away. He stayed. He watched me with eyes that held both sympathy and urgency, as if what I was holding was not just a message, but a turning point. That he said quietly, "I think you deserve to know why he left." I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I didn't move for a long moment. That I simply held the envelope and felt my life, my trust, my marriage, sway like something on the verge of shattering. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope, the paper tearing softly like something fragile being broken. Inside was a single sheet, neatly folded. It was not handwritten. It was typed, clean, precise, as if emotions had been purposely removed. At first, the words didn't make sense. I had to read them twice. And then again. It was a loan contract. A large one. My name was on it as a co-signer. The signature beside mine was undeniably Daniel's handwriting. He had taken a loan in my name. My credit. My financial future. The weight of the realization did not strike like a sudden blow. It crept, slow and suffocating, like air being siphoned from my lungs. At the bottom of the paper was a note. Short. Clear. Cold. I can't do this anymore. I need to move on. Don't contact me. There was no apology. No explanation. Not even acknowledgement of what we had once built together. This was not a moment of emotional collapse or confusion. It was planned abandonment. My grip on the paper tightened instinctively, not to hold it, but as though part of me hoped I could crush the truth into something smaller, more manageable. Something that could hurt less. The dishwasher, still standing beside the table, watched me carefully, not intrusive, but aware. He knew. He knew what this letter meant. And that frightened me more than the letter itself. He sat quietly across from me, as if giving me the space to breathe but refusing to let me drown alone. His voice was gentle when he finally spoke. He explained that Daniel had been coming to the restaurant for weeks, always in the same mood, anxious, calculating, restless. He had conversations in hushed tones with someone in the back, a man who was not a coworker. Money was exchanged. The dishwasher had seen and overheard enough to understand that Daniel was involved in something dangerous or desperate, gambling, debts, something that made him reckless. And I realized, slowly, painfully, that my husband had not only chosen to leave me, he had chosen to use me on the way out. The truth came in layered realizations. The nights he said he was working late. The sudden financial tension he dismissed as stress. The way he avoided discussions about the future. The new impatience in his voice when I asked him anything real. These moments had not been random shifts. They had been signs. And I had ignored them. Or perhaps more accurately, I had trusted him too much to see them. The dishwasher told me Daniel had instructed the restaurant staff ahead of time. He had left enough money to pay for the dinner, likely to avoid immediate embarrassment, but he had intended the envelope to be given to me after he left. A clean break. Efficient. Heartless. I wondered how long he had been planning this. How many days he had rehearsed this exit. How many mornings he looked at me and smiled while knowing he was preparing to discard our life together like an empty plate. The restaurant continued around me as though nothing had changed. Silverware clinked softly. Someone laughed lightly across the room. A couple toasted champagne. Life moved forward, unaware that mine was splitting open. I sat there, still, silent, absorbing the enormity of what had happened. The weight of betrayal settled over me slowly, like dust gathering in the corners of a long-abandoned room. My first instinct was self-blame. What did I miss? What did I do wrong? Was I too distant? Too trusting? Too hopeful? But as those thoughts began weaving through my mind, they were interrupted by something steadier, something firmer than grief. The dishwasher, his face kind but steady, told me that I should not blame myself. He had seen many things while working there, people unraveling privately in quiet corners of his shifts. He said Daniel had chosen to use me. He said some people make selfishness into habit, not accident. The word settled in me. And slowly, the self-blame loosened. The reality was brutal, but the truth was clear. This was not about me failing as a wife. This was about him failing as a partner, as a human being with basic decency. He had looked at the person who trusted him most and chosen to make her collateral damage. My thoughts drifted back through our years together. The vacations, the late-night talks, the shared laughter, the hopes we once whispered into each other's shoulders. And then the silence. The distance. The coldness. I realized that the man I fell in love with had already left long before tonight. His body was still present in our home, but the soul of our marriage had already faded. I thought of my future suddenly, not as a married woman, but as someone betrayed and financially endangered. The loan was real. The consequences were real. He had not only left me, he had left me to bear the burden of his mistakes alone. And yet, beneath the pain, another feeling began to rise. Quiet at first, but steady. Strength. Not dramatic. Not loud. But something resolute, something that recognized that I was still standing, even as the pieces of my life shifted around me. The dishwasher asked if I had someone I could call. I nodded faintly, though I wasn't entirely sure who I meant. I felt suspended between the life I had and the one I now faced. But I knew something clearly: I would not collapse here. Not in front of strangers. Not because of him. I folded the paper carefully, not out of tenderness but out of control. I placed it back into the envelope. I thanked the man who sat across from me, because he did something my husband failed to do. He treated me like a human being who mattered. Then I stood, not because I was ready, but because standing was the first step in reclaiming what had been taken from me. I walked out of the restaurant into the cool night. And though the world was still dark, I knew the next chapter would not be written by him.